There's so many things that he does. He's super strong. He's way stronger than your average Earth human. He can fly. He has super speed. He's got heat vision. He has X-ray vision. He's got super hearing. He's got super breath. He's got mental powers. He's got stamina. He's got healing factor. All of these things are really cool.
Yeah. And I would wonder, why wouldn't everybody on that planet, if they know this planet exists and they know that they can get here, I just graduated high school, time to go to Earth and dominate.
3, 2, 1, punch it.
Could you jump to light speed in that tin can? Go back in time in the DeLorean? Will it crash or take to the sky? Tell me, smart guy, does it fly?
Welcome to Does It Fly, the podcast that puts your favorite sci-fi properties, inventions, and conceits to the test. I'm your mad scientist, Hakeem Oluseyi.
And I'm your pop culture expert, Tamara Krinsky. Time to dive into today's topic and see, does it fly? Well, hello, Does It Fly fans. We have an exciting announcement.
We are running a contest.
That's right. We are doing a great giveaway, and there are multiple ways to enter.
Multiple? Tomorrow, that's too many.
Well, then let's make it easy. Just go to the link in our bio, and all the ways to enter will be outlined right there.
Cool, that's easy to do. So you better go before the contest ends. When does it end?
The contest runs from July 2nd to August 22nd.
All right, so the contest is open to anyone 18 years or older and living in the United States. So if that's you, what are you waiting for? Best of luck.
And may the odds forever be in your favor.
What? That's not very Roddenberry.
Hey, we cover all franchises.
Welcome back. So good to see you, T.
Good to see you, H. How you doing, Dr. O?
Man, that's a lot of letters. I'm confused now. But, one thing I'm not confused about is I think that this show might actually be about me this time.
Really? And why
yes,
is that?
Because I derive my powers from the sun.
Tell me more.
I am known as a scientist in the world, and I cut my scientific teeth being a solar physicist. That's where I made my scientific discoveries. That's where I first developed technologies that became standard in the world. And so my scientific powers are derived directly from the sun.
Well, if we're going to talk about powers derived from the sun, then this one might actually be about me. Because I actually did a little project with Marvel where they turned people into superheroes and they asked what you wanted your powers to be inspired by. And I said I wanted my powers to be inspired by photosynthesis.
What? That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. Yeah. Because, interestingly, I found out about this. I love watching different nature shows. And I found out about this little nudibranch that eats algae and incorporates those cells into its body. So it has all these appendages on its back that are doing photosynthesis as it, so it can both eat and photosynthesize. So there we go. We got two solar powered individuals talking about a solar powered cat from another world.
That's right, everyone. Welcome to Does It Fly, the show where we talk about the science and story behind your favorite gizmos, gadgets, and technological wonders in sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. And today, we are going with an OG superhero. I'm talking about Superman.
The original G. Listen, I don't know if Superman was the original, but, we'll talk about this later. But my childhood, my Gen X childhood, Superman was the dude. So I am so happy to talk about Superman today.
And specifically, we're going to be talking about Superman 1 and Superman 2. Superman 1 came out in 1978, directed by Richard Donner, and the sequel. So the Superman universe is now it's the DC universe, but the Superman universe is vast. I mean, obviously it started out in the comics, he was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. But you've got comics, you've got animated shows, you've got more merchandise than, I don't know, that can fill like a gazillion rooms. You've had live action shows, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But today we're going to be focusing on these two movies, and specifically the idea that Superman gets his powers from the yellow sun of our solar system.
I didn't think about this before when I was doing my research on this episode, but I should have. And that is the question of how far away is the planet Krypton and its system from our system? Because they had a census of the stars to know that our star had the right wavelengths of light that would give him powers. So how did they know that? And how did they know there was a planet here, right? Here, we're modern humans. We're just getting to the part now where we're discovering planets around nearby stars. So they're far ahead of us.
Oh, yeah, they are way, way far ahead of us. And that's something that they talk about. Superman's parents, when they are preparing to launch him from Krypton, talk about the fact that they're sending him to a civilization that is way, way less advanced than their own. They know what's happening throughout the galaxy. They have a lot of information about other places that we haven't quite gotten there yet.
Yeah, we're on our way. We're getting there. We've discovered Proxima B around the nearest star, the Proxima Centauri system, right? That's the nearest star system to our sun. Most stars are not alone like our sun is. They're in double star and triple star systems. And
That
Proxima
sounds
B.
so lonely.
I know, right? I'll tell you something. We are in what is known as the local bubble within our galaxy. It's believed that a supernova exploded and cleared out this area, and our galaxy is right on the edge of a galactic void. So it's like the entire universe is avoiding us, or we're avoiding them. I don't know.
I feel like there's years of therapy that I could go under that would explore that metaphor, but that's for an off-camera conversation.
Yeah. All right. So for those of you who don't know the format of the show, here's what we do. We break down a technology, like Tamara said, in three ways. One way is I talk about the science of it, and Tamara, my good friend, she ain't a nerdy physicist like me. She's nerdy, but not, with the same background. So she is you in that conversation. And then we go into the story, and then I become you because she knows all about movie making, story writing, and I always learn something. And we don't script this out. It's a conversation between two pals, and it's 100% authentic. And then we go into your favorite section, right? Or your second favorite section.
I like all the sections because I always learn something from you. I mean, this is what happens when you throw together a pop culture expert like me who loves science and a scientist like you who loves pop culture. So then for our third part, we have a discussion of does it fly for the vibes? And based on what we've talked about in the first section and the second section, that informs what we get to in the third section. So Hakeem, take it away. Hit me with the science of Superman deriving his powers from our solar system's yellow sun, as described in Superman 1.
I am so ready for this.
Are you ready for it?
I love Superman and I love the sun. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this. So the first thing is when his parents discuss that he's being sent to this planet that orbits a yellow sun, I have to point out that our sun ain't yellow.
Ooh,
all right?
Controversial point number one.
That's right. If anything, it's a green sun.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So I have to introduce this idea that physicists created. So physicists in the 19th century, they were fascinated with the fact that, we're trying to figure out how everything works. And one thing that they noticed about matter is that when you heat it up, it begins to emit light. It glows, right? So a bar of iron, might be black, but then you heat it and it becomes red hot. And then it gets, yellow or straw hot, as they say, right? And so the intensity of the light and the color of the light changes with temperature. And that's how we know the temperatures of stars. If you go out at night you can see some stars that appear to be blue, like the star Spica. So there's this thing you say. So if you look at the Big Dipper, it has an arc in the handle. And so it goes follow the arc to Arcturus and speed to Spica, right? And Spica is this blue star. If you look at Betelgeuse in Orion, it's a red star. So red stars are about 3,000 degrees at their surface. That's kind of cool. Our star, the sun, is about 5,800 degrees Kelvin at the surface. Its emission peaks in the green part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Blue stars are really hot. They can be 10,000 degrees, 20, 30,000.
That's so interesting because just when I think about color and the way that heat is usually visually depicted, which I as a storyteller think a lot about, it's usually the opposite. Like we usually think of blue as being cooler, starts to heat up, it gets yellow. And then when it gets to red, it's like that red hot thing. That's so interesting.
Yeah, that's not the way to because we think in terms of fire and ice, right? Which can appear, an iceberg appears to be blue.
But you're giving me all these great song cues this time.
So we got to change all the water handles in the world. So the other element of this is the fact that stars don't emit a single color, and neither does anything. So we're relatively cool objects, right? So so you can look at an object, and based on the color of the light it emits, you can tell its temperature. At our temperature, we emit infrared light. That's why, in the military, they wear infrared goggles, and now I can see the enemy at night. But it's not a single wavelength. It's a spectrum. And I think this is key for Superman and his powers, because his parents say that the yellow star unlocks his powers, but their planet Krypton orbits a red star. Now, two things. Number one, the vast majority of all stars are red, because if you look at the populations of objects, whatever they are, rocks, stars, there are many more small ones than there are big ones. Small stars tend to be cool. There's an exception to this. And small mass stars tend to be small. They tend to be red and cool and last for very long time frames. Like there's a type of star known as a red dwarf. Every red dwarf that has ever been born in our galaxy.
For those of you who are listening, he said red dwarf, and I couldn't help but point to myself because as a 4'11" redhead, that term has perhaps been applied to me. Sorry.
There's another type of star that's old called a red giant, but we don't have to worry about that here. And blue stars tend to be hot, okay? But here's the thing. If you heat up an object, every object that's opaque, like I said, emits light. I'm doing it. The rocks on the ground are doing it. But they're doing it in infrared so you don't see it. That's why if you heat a bar of iron, once you start getting into hundreds and thousands of degrees, that's when it starts to emit visible light, right? So objects that are like tens of thousands emit ultraviolet. Matter that's 1,000,000 degrees emits X-rays. But it's not, like I said, a single wavelength. It's this very specific curve known as a black body curve. Why black body? Because if I was to turn my detector and measure the light that's coming from you, there's going to be two sources of light. One is the light that you yourself are emitting, and the other is the light that is reflecting off of you.
Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So a black body is an object that doesn't reflect any light. So the only light you see is the light that it emits, okay? So if you get that pure spectrum of that black body, what you'll find is that for a cool object, it has this, if you take a bell curve, stretch out one side of it and truncate the other side, and that gives you the black body curve. So as an object gets hotter, those higher energies, a cool object does not emit higher energies of light. So once you heat it up, it's still, the spectrum of the cooler object is inside the spectrum of the hotter object. So a hotter star will emit all the light that a red star emits, plus a lot of light that the cooler star does not emit. But here's the thing. It's not based on a single wavelength. So if I compare ratios of, oh, how much light here compared to here, compared to here, compared to here, then I can get something that's very specific to a particular black body curve, which is specific to a particular color, right? So the sun spectrum unlocking this power would be something like a key, right? It has to be this specific distribution of light, not a single color that would unlock it. Now, here's the question. What could that be? What could be unlocked? to make you able to fly, make you super strong, make you super fast, X-ray vision.
If we could figure that out, we would make a lot of money.
Right? We would take a lot of money because we'll just do it to ourselves and become supervillains. So,
hey, speak for yourself. I like to help people.
Supervillains on the side of good. Huh? I don't know how that works, but whatever. I'm on the side of good. Okay, so here's the where I'm going with this. The way matter and light interact. Matter typically ignores just about all the light that's incident upon it. But there are certain resonances where the matter and the light interact incredibly strong. And so if you, for example, are there's some gas cloud out in space, the light from a star passes through it. Just about all the light goes straight through. But there are very specific wavelengths where it doesn't make it through. And so when you receive that light, you see these gaps, and that forms what is known as an absorption spectrum. And it looks kind of like a barcode. And every element has a unique barcode associated with it that has to do with its interaction with light and where those resonances lie. So if there are resonances between the light of our star and the matter that, and it's not just the matter, but it's the energy states of that matter, right? Then you can now have a special lock key scenario that could unlock all of these abilities.
And in this case, the matter that we're talking about, just to be clear, is Superman.
Okay. He's a chunk of matter. He's still made of atoms and molecules. They're arranged differently from the rest of us.
Sure. Okay.
Clearly, yeah. But so here's the thing. It would be so easy to say, okay, everything is impossible. But you know how we roll. I look at it and say, how could I make this possible?
All right. What you got for me?
All right, here's what I got. Everything when you look at Superman, it has to do with energy. And I'm talking about crazy energy. Mm-hmm. Just the power, the strength that he has, right? He catches a missile in the chest. It's one thing to not be harmed by it. It's another thing to be able to just stand. You didn't move me, right? Man, the amount of energy that would go into powering his muscles and his system to keep him upright has to be massive. So the way that we animals and plants on Earth generate energy is from chemical bonds, which are bonds between electrons in atoms and molecules, a particular molecule called ATP. That can't power Superman. You can't power Superman on ATP.
No.
And the only thing I could think of is two options that are as powerful. One is nuclear energy, like fusion. And the other is matter-antimatter annihilation, like the Starship Enterprise powers itself with a matter-antimatter conversion chamber. But, if there's antimatter hanging around, that has its problems because once it's hard to control, right? Yeah. So where do I go with this? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to invent a new organelle inside his cells. We have mitochondria. I'm going to invent cryptochondria. And so this new organelle is able to do what is known as cold fusion.
And so sorry, just to pause for 1 sec for the folks who, like me, it's been a minute since we've taken bio class. Just can you define organelle real quick? Remind us what that is.
So within our cells, we have these things, ribosomes, these RNA things that are wrapped in their own membrane and they're inside. So just like we have organs inside of us, which are also like separate life forms. Like every cell of our body is a separate life form, if you can think of it that way, that are working in sync to create our multicellular bodies. So now you have organs inside of your body, and cells have organelles inside of them. So instead of being powered by a mitochondria organelle that's creating ATP that stores energy in molecular bonds, you can have some, cryptochondria that does fusion inside of its cells, but they're mostly in a dormant state. But when that key of sunlight comes in, they can turn on. And so in Superman's rest state, for example, because you don't want him working all the time, because now he's a big bomb, if that's the case. And he has to have all these systems to control all this energy. So you don't want that happening all the time, right? And there's another key to Superman, and that is that when Superman takes a missile in the chest, his suit doesn't tear. But anyway, here's what I'm getting at. Superman's invulnerability is something that extends a bit beyond his surface in order to protect his suit as well. That's a clue that we have. So there's some sort of field, right? So now, if you look at it, here's what I'm getting at. So I wrote some things down here, right? His cells, these cryptochondria, would be like microfusion reactors. And inside of his body, right, he has to have heat rejection because they're going to create a lot of heat. He needs radiation shielding because fusion creates gamma rays and, other harmful ionizing radiation. And he needs to be able to store energy like capacitors do. Like that's what his heat vision does, right? He has build up the energy, store it, then blast it out, right? But then kryptonite turns it all off. So what does that mean? Is kryptonite putting out some sort of field also clearly that shuts down this entire process, right? And deprives him of his energy, so he starts to wither and die. So I can make myself a working Superman by creating systems that can control this energy, store this energy, confine this energy, right? And then make it useful when necessary. And ain't none of that really possible in the real world. So this whole thing about being powered by a yellow sun, and let me get to that. Like I said before, our sun ain't yellow, it's green. Mm-hmm. In the sense that its main light output peaks in the green part of the spectrum. But color is not light that it is emitted. Color happens in the brain, right? But this matter light interaction is about the actual spectrum of the light. So, what am I getting at here?
I was just about to ask you that. So does it fly or does it not fly?
There's no way to make a real Superman with real physics, right? I have to create a cellular structure inside of him, a cellular density that is way higher than what we have, that will make him super heavy, which they never, allude to in the show. So, Superman, even though Superman, what do they say? Look in the plane. It's a bird. It's a plane. No, look at the ground, because Superman's power of getting those powers from the sun, that don't fly. Not in the real world, but I can create a world where it does.
And that is why we have so many amazing creative writers who bring legends like Superman to life.
That's right. So now let's turn to the story of Superman. We're talking about two movies. One last thing I want to say is I've actually worked with the first Superman's son, Will Reeve. He's a journalist, and I do some science journalism. And when I first worked with him, I was like, this dude looks just like Superman. Right? And then I looked him up after, and I was like, oh, that's his son. That's amazing. But, they're both handsome men.
Well, okay. So to pivot into story, I'll actually use something you were talking about, which was the density issue, right? So going back to the very beginning of the film. So Superman the movie, 1978, They get Marlon Brando to play Superman's dad, Jor-El. They also get Gene Hackman to play Lex Luthor. So you've got these heavy hitters. And if you look at the first Superman movie, it's almost a movie that happens in three acts. You have the first act on Krypton. Everything was kind of shot through cloud and smoke, and the language is almost, the tone is almost Shakespearean, and that was done on purpose. Then you get
Yes.
to Superman's youth in Smallville, and that is almost like a Wyeth painting. You know, it's a lot of sort of sepia tones, golds and hues, things like that. And then you get to Metropolis, and that's kind of where the comic book sensibility punches through a little bit more. Humor comes in, it's things are snappier, you know, you get Lois Lane. So you've got sort of these three sections, but it's all kicked off on Krypton. And it was funny going back to it because, you know, this is 1978. And I think there's a legitimate argument that this movie really reset what superhero movies could be.
Reset?
Yeah, because there have been superhero movies before that, but this
Okay.
this really reset what it could be in a modern era. And I'm using modern era in quotes because obviously now it's, you know, almost 50 years later. But they made
Maybe.
movies in a new way. They actually invented things to help put what they wanted on screen, which we'll get to in a little bit. But to kick it off and sort of reintroduce Superman to the public, because over the course of Superman's life, he'd waxed and waned in popularity depending on what was happening in the world. He'd been depicted in a lot of different ways, you know, you sort of from like the post World War II era to now. So at the beginning, you have Jor-El and Lara, his wife, state specifically.
His dense molecular structure will make him strong.
He'll be odd.
Different. He'll be fast. Virtually invulnerable.
From the very beginning, well, they say, you know, well, it does say in there somewhere that, you know, the energy from Earth's yellow sun will help to also make him super powered. They also bring this other thing up. You know, that immediately kind of makes me go, huh, okay, so there's multiple reasons that he has superpowers, right? And then I go into looking at all of these different powers, a bunch of which you touched on before, right? So there's so many things that he does. I mean, he's super strong. He's way stronger than your average Earth human. Although it seems to be equal with the other Kryptonians who show up in, you know,
Right.
in
Yeah.
the second movie. He can fly, which, you know, initially it was jumping over tall buildings in a single bound, but it's very clear in this Superman, flying is a huge, huge part of the mythology of him. He has super speed. You know, we see that great scene on the farm where he's racing against the train. And fun fact, they actually tried to do that in a bunch of different ways. They tried some animation and putting some speed trails behind him. They tried, you know, models. Ultimately, they actually lifted him on wires on a rig so that his feet aren't actually touching the ground.
Oh, wow.
And that's how they made that whole sequence work, which I think is really cool. You know, he's got heat vision, he has x-ray vision, he's got super hearing, he's got super breath, he's got mental powers, he's got stamina, he's got healing factor. All of these things are really cool. But I, as a viewer, you know, kind of had to get over a really big, like, suspension of disbelief to think that all of these things are just powered by the sun.
Yeah. And I would wonder, why wouldn't everybody on that planet, if they know this planet exists and they know that they can get here, why I'd be on the first, you know, I just graduated high school, time to go to Earth and dominate.
Yeah, well, and I mean, that's a great question. That is what you do actually see, essentially, as part of a big part of the plot in the second movie. And I think that has to do with the way that they set up Kryptonian society. Like, even though you might be able to come to Earth and dominate, they set up Kryptonian society as being much, much, much more advanced than we are here, right? Like they know that we exist. They know the kind of planet we have. They know the kind of sun that we orbit. They, you know about many worlds in the galaxy, whereas we don't have that information. So on one hand, like, sure, you could come back and dominate, but on the other hand, you'd be dominating in like a backwater town that doesn't have all the things that you like to have. So Is that fun?
Okay.
I don't know.
How about vacation? So let's go fly on vacation. Like if I go to the Moon Titan for vacation, because strap some wings on yourself on Titan, jump off of a cliff, you could fly because the gravity is so low and the atmosphere is so thick. This would be a great destination or a theme park.
I would be totally down with that. And I actually would not be surprised at all if that's in our future. And I feel like that is something we do actually see in especially a lot of movies for sure, but especially a lot of books where, someone's going to vacation off world. I mean, that's in Total Recall, actually. We see that too. Just to call out one of them. But yeah, so when you put all that together, I don't know. This is a controversial take, but I just don't know that Superman getting all of his powers from the yellow sun, just from the yellow sun, actually flies. And they sort of state that in the beginning. And it's hard for me to get past that if I'm really thinking about story. Like, it's too many things put in one.
They pack a lot into Superman.
Yeah. And again, like maybe possibly that has to do with the fact that, it's an earlier era. We have so many more superhero stories now existing in multiple media that are widespread in much larger ways. And so in some ways, the heroes have gotten more specific. I mean, they were always specific in the comics. They needed to be because of, how many heroes or villains or superpowered beings you had. But, it's kind of like they threw everything at Superman in the movies, or at least in this movie, in this set of movies. So, that's a piece of it. So I might have to have the very unpopular opinion that Superman.
Unpopular or blasphemous?
It might be blasphemous. Getting his, but I'll make up for it in the vibes. Getting his like powers from the yellow sun doesn't, like, I feel like I'm supposed to believe that because that's what the story tells me to believe. I don't know. I mean, he sort of seems to have the powers that he has for whatever situation he needs.
Then do they ever explain why Kryptonite has this particular power over him the way it does?
Not in the first.
Because that's the planet he's from. Pieces of Krypton.
Right. Well, they don't explain it in the first two movies. Again, there's a lot of Superman IP out there, so I'm sure that somewhere in another piece of it, there is an explanation. And if, folks want to chime in on the comments with that, that'd be awesome. You have to remember, it's not that Kryptonite weakens him to be a super weak being. It just turns him into a regular person. It takes away the advantage that he has as an alien coming to our planet.
It's kind of like beer.
I mean, kind of. What was that show where there was a show where when the aliens drank milk, that had the same effect on them as alcohol? Was it Alien Nation?
Oh my God.
I think it was, I could be wrong. I think it was Alien Nation. There were a lot of bald caps. Okay. So I'm going to deliver my final verdict. Unfortunately, I think story-wise, Superman getting his powers solely from our yellow sun does not fly because it doesn't actually track with what his parents, played by Marlon Brando, sets up so masterfully in the beginning of how this all works.
All right, so let me ask you a question. So I've had friends that are physicists who have been consultants for movies to make sure they're getting the physics right. Mm-hmm. Were they doing that back in the 70s?
I'm sure there probably were some, but I have not read about any kind of science consultant for this film.
Yeah.
For this set of films. Just FYI too, people, so people know, these two films were actually shot pretty much back to back. The idea was always that they were going to shoot two films at once. So that's, how they went into the making of these films. All right, now that I've given that, I feel like I need to pivot really fast into the vibes, because what I will say is I think this is a classic case of where when we say, does it fly for the vibes? And you and I have each said, no, it doesn't really fly for the science, doesn't really fly for the story, but we don't care. I will speak for myself, but I don't care because I will say unequivocally, this movie totally flies for the vibes. It is super cool to watch on screen. Movie magic has made this so much fun. It was revolutionizing when it first came out in 1978. So I'm all in on the vibes on this one.
You know, I always ask about bias because I feel that, you know, before the movie, from the comics, from the animation, Superman was already so beloved. So now imagine there's this thing you love and you get it in the storyboard forms in comics. You get this little animation, but now I'm going into a theater, the big screen, the speakers and the sound, the crowd. Before the opening scene rolls, you're already excited, right? So, you know, it's a cultural event like going to a concert for your favorite artist. You know, you're already primed for it. So can you actually be objective? You know, so the whole enterprise of Superman, yeah, the vibe is dope.
Wait,
but
here's a question. That's a really good question. When building on that, when you are that primed for something, when you are that hyped for something, I feel like it can also disappoint you a lot more. So you may go in with a bias because you really, really, really want to love it. But sometimes when you really want to love something and it disappoints you, that's even worse.
Yeah, you're right. And there's I hate to say this, to admit this, but Star Wars was like that for me.
Wait, what?
I told the story on here before, but there was so much hype around Star Wars, the first movie. And, you know, I didn't go see it when it was, you know, at its heyday. I wait till it got to the dollar theater, and I went in Laurel, Mississippi to watch it. Went and watched it by myself. My mom dropped me off. You know, I was a youngster, like 13 or something, 12, somewhere in there. And, you know, I was like, yeah. It didn't blow me away, you know, and it could have been related to the high expectation that I had.
Maybe. Okay, so bringing it back to this movie, do you remember what your reaction was?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it. And then when I saw the second movie and there were other Kryptonians, I love that. To see them flying and fighting, and then, you know, Superman facing an equal. Oh, definitely. I loved it.
So this movie was actually the first movie, not the second one, but the first movie was actually nominated for 3 Oscars, and it actually won a special Oscar for special achievement in visual effects. And that, to me, is part of why it flies for the vibes and why you had the reaction you did, why I had the reaction I did when I first saw it on the small screen. Eventually I saw, you know, it in a revival theater on the big screen. And that is because they did such a masterful job of fulfilling our expectation of what does it look like when Superman flies, and what does it look like live in live action. Because yes, there'd been the TV show with George Reeve, but this movie took it to a whole other level. We get to see a live person fly, and they tried so many things. I want to bring in a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, and I wrote some things down because they tried so many different things to make this work. They catapulted a model Superman out of an air cannon. They tried a radio controlled model of Superman, but didn't feel lifelike. They also tried a model flown on wires. Also not lifelike. They actually tried a version where they did sort of like an animated version where they had speed trails behind him. You know, basically like you'd have your live action Clark Kent. And then, you know, he turned into Superman, and then no.
So how did they ultimately pull it off?
So hold on. They projected an image behind a stuntman who had no idea how to act or fly. So that didn't work. And ultimately, the quote that you hear over and over from folks involved in the movie is the best special effect of all was Christopher Reeve. So he had been a glider pilot. So he knew how to hold his body in that aerodynamic position so that when they finally did come up with a way to do this, he was totally, totally believable. So they did a couple of different things. Sometimes they would have him basically in this sort of harness kind of a thing. It was a front projection technique, which if you want to go down the rabbit hole on that, I don't know if you're listening or watching this, but folks, after you're done listening or watching to us, I would advise looking at a visual version of that because you're going to want to actually see it in action. But basically, you had an actor mounted on an arm in front of the screen who could then be inserted into the shot with optical effects. And they basically they created a rig. They had a rig that made Christopher made it so that he could just remain horizontal the entire time using that muscle memory from being a glider pilot. And
Wow.
the camera would actually rotate around him to create the illusion of movement.
Wow.
Right. So that's
The
one.
cleverness of these movie makers.
Right. So that's one thing that they did, which is super
Yeah.
cool. They also did a lot of blue screen technique. And so that, was generally used when he was further away, when he was the only one in the frame who was flying. There weren't not for the stuff with him and Lois. And they used it kind of when he had to twist when he was flying. And much smaller in the frame. So, and then of course there was a harness with wires, which he and Margot Kidder who plays Lois Lane, spent a lot of time in. And they were able to use that too. So there was the whole shot just would come alive when he would get into that. He was so
Yeah.
dedicated according to everything that I've looked at. And I honestly just think that that is why it flies for the vibes. When he's flying, I'm not thinking about the sun. I'm not thinking about how he gets his powers. I'm thinking
Right.
about
Yeah.
just going through the sky. I'm thinking about circling the earth, that last shot in the first film. And then, of course, in the second film, when you've got all these great fight scenes, I'm thinking about that as well, because they do a good job with that in the second movie, too.
This movie really embodies the vibe of this movie, right? Embodies what you always talk about. They build a what if, and does as an audience member, do you buy into it? And you're absolutely right. Before we decided to take on this topic, I never questioned it. I just took it.
Right.
And Superman was Superman, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a tribute to the world building that they do. I mentioned in the first movie, that sort of 3-act structure that it has, these sort of the juxtaposition of these different worlds. He really is, you really get to see him as this offspring of aliens who comes. They emphasize that at the beginning, so we understand that he really isn't human, as attractive a human as he may be, or he may look like, I should say.
Yeah. So here's the thing that always the juxtaposition for me is that typically when aliens come to Earth, they're invading, they're nefarious, and so we have this benign guardian alien that comes down to Earth, because even the other Kryptonians aren't Superman. They're Kryptonians, but they don't have the same moral makeup that
that's
Superman
why they got
does.
outlawed from Krypton before it gets destroyed. That's why they get sent to the Phantom Zone.
Yeah. And even this idea, how they're far ahead of their time in the idea of planetary destruction, an entire planet. The idea of that, imagine the type of force that it would take to destroy a planet.
Mm-hmm.
But planets do get destroyed. Planets get, they collide, they get orbitally kicked out of their solar system or kicked into the star that they orbit based on gravitational interactions with other planets. These are things that really do occur. And, for them to have the foresight of, hey, we want to make a movie about this guy who's super powered. How do we do that? Oh, let's make him from another planet. Yeah, but why would he leave? And why would he be the only one? Oh, I know, because his planet got destroyed and his parents, their last act was to send him to us.
Well, think about it. If you think back, to these two guys, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, just hanging out in Cleveland, coming up with the ideas for this. And, I think that one of the things, I won't go into politics right now, but one of the things that I think Superman represented, in which has been documented, is this idea that here was an immigrant coming to our Earth and doing good things. And, keep in mind that this all took, the invention of Superman, the creation of Superman, took place, amidst like what was happening with World War II and that whole environment. So, context is always important when you think about where the stories come from. And every Superman, series, every Superman movie set, because there have now been many of them and we've had multiple Supermen. And we're about to get one more because obviously, James Gunn's Superman is coming out. It'll be an interesting reset. We're going to all see what David Corenswet is like as our Clark Kent / Superman. And my understanding from what we've seen, a little bit in the previews and the trailers is that they are actually going to lean a little bit more into getting his powers from the sun and the differences between our system and that. So I'm very curious to see how it plays out in this next incarnation of Superman.
Yes. Interesting. So I wonder, one question about Superman. This is not vibey, but tell me if you have a sense of it, because I don't. But for some reason in my mind, I imagine that Superman is super long-lived, like much longer than an average human lifespan. Is that real? Is that a thing?
I don't know. Let's turn it to our audience because I don't know the answer to that.
Right.
I mean, I don't. I feel like immortality is not something they talk about a lot. But wait, our producers are weighing in. Our resident Superman fan producer Elliot is saying that yes, that is a thing. So yeah, there's your answer.
Here is why I bring that up. Because a star is not a static thing. It is an evolving thing. Mm-hmm. So our sun was bluer in the past and is evolving to being redder. So it will eventually become a red giant. Its surface temperature will be half what it is now.
Which means depending on how long, if this is how Superman gets his powers, depending on how long he hangs out on Earth, he would eventually lose them.
Exactly. Yeah. So before he does, he can move Earth to our orbit farther away from the sun, because as it cools, the reason that's happening is because this outer layer, what we call the envelope, is expanding. And so like in, almost 2 billion years from now, 1.8 billion years, there's going to be so much precipitation from this extra heat coming in. It's going to rain the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And we're going to go into a situation where plants don't have the carbon dioxide they need for photosynthesis. So the entire food web is going to shut down. So we need to move the Earth a bit away from the sun in order to survive. So before he loses his powers, he must move Earth to a more distant orbit.
All right.
That's what we can make him.
I think you've just laid out the plot for a future Superman movie set far, far, far in the future.
Far, far, far in the future. Superman is our orbital adjuster.
Well, we want to thank you all today for tuning in to Does It Fly, to hear our musings on Superman past and present.
Wait. We never gave a definitive verdict on whether or not it flies for the vibe.
Oh, sorry. I guess in my mind I did when I first introduced it. But okay, to put a finer point on it, for me, yes, Superman totally flies for the vibe. Hakeem, what about you? Does Superman fly for the vibes?
Yes, ma'am.
And just to be clear, we're not talking about like everything Superman. We're talking specifically about what we talk about on our show, which is Superman getting his powers from the sun. And I will also add just one last thing about that. The other thing they do in the movie, which again, like, I just go with it because it's cool to watch, is in the second movie, spoiler alert, in the second movie when Superman tricks his fellow evil Kryptonians into losing their powers, that is all based on the idea that different kinds of energy and light give or take away powers. So they really do use it as a plot thing in the second movie, which again is another reason that, like, for the vibes, totally flies. I buy into it.
All right. I buy into it too. I never questioned it until we thought to question it. So that means that it was already vibing and I'm in with it. So back to thanking all of you who joined us today to listen in. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I always enjoy talking to my good friend Tamara. So listen, we're here every Friday. Check us out and we're going to keep coming. I hope you keep coming back.
Hakeem, thank you as always for teaching me something new. I'm going to be thinking about colors and what they represent for heat. And if you have a topic all that you would love us to tackle, put it in the comments. You can find us at doesitflypod.com, and you can find us at doesitflypod on all the socials. Thanks again for listening. Give us a thumbs up or a like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.
Did you get it? Did you get the secret word?
Well, if not, this is your reminder to scroll back to find it.
And don't forget to click the link in our bio to find out all the different ways you can enter our super sweet giveaway.
Woohoo! Good luck, and may the force be with you.
A Star Wars quote.
Yeah, when I said all franchises, I meant it. All franchises.